Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are digging into Australia's housing crisis. You hear the endless debate about it, but what if the whole conversation is just a distraction? The source material we're exploring today makes a pretty bold claim that the crisis is actually a carefully staged play, and to get what's really going on, we need to look behind the curtain.
So let's dive right into that idea. The whole crisis isn't just a simple economic problem of supply and demand. No. It's framed here as a piece of theater, complete with a hidden script. And while we can all see the actors on the stage, the real story, well, that's about who's pulling the strings from the director's chair. And on that stage, we see all these familiar characters, right? You've got the greedy landlord, the desperate renter, the politician who throws their hands up and says they're helpless, and of course the migrant family. The public debate gets stuck here, just pointing fingers, trying to figure out who to blame, and a lot of those fingers point towards immigration as the main reason for all this chaos.
But what if that's all part of the show? A distraction? The source material really pushes us to look right past the stage and ask the most important question. Who is really running things? Who actually benefits from every single line in this script? And here's the big reveal. According to this analysis, the silent director, the one this entire play is written for, is the Australian banking sector. They're the ones shaping this entire performance from the shadows.
So, how in the world did they become the director? Well, the argument is that our banks have completely changed their business model. They used to fund productivity, things like factories, new businesses, but now they've shifted to almost exclusively funding asset inflation. They've essentially become giant hedge funds that have placed one single massive bet on Aussie housing.
Okay, let's dig into the specifics of this bet, because when you see how it's structured on their books, the numbers are genuinely staggering. So take a look at this. Just one bank, Westpac. Nearly $500 billion of their loan book is tied up in residential mortgages. That is just an incredible, almost unbelievable concentration of risk in one single asset class.
And this chart really just drives the point home. Almost 70 cents of every single dollar Westpac lends out goes to a residential mortgage. The source actually calls them a monoline mortgage lender with a side hustle in business banking. That's not a diversified portfolio. That's an all-in bet.
And this is where the perspective really shifts. Think about this analogy. It frames what we just call standard practice in Australian banking as something that, in any other financial circle, would be seen as incredibly, unbelievably reckless. You'd be fired on the spot. But here is the trap. Banks run on leverage, and their safety net is razor thin. A leverage ratio of just over 5% means that for every, say, $5 of their own money, they're lending out about $100. They are walking a very, very high tightrope, with almost no buffer. So here's the crucial point. Because that financial buffer is so tiny, the very survival of the banks is now directly tied to house prices staying incredibly high. If house prices ever fell to what we might call affordable levels, the big four banks could technically become insolvent. Their entire business model depends on this bubble never, ever bursting.
This extreme vulnerability, well, it leads us straight to the government. According to this analysis, the government has made a choice. It has decided that it must protect the banks, no matter the cost, which effectively creates an unwritten insurance policy backed by you, the taxpayer.
And that choice creates an unspoken but primary directive for all Australian economic policy. House prices must never, ever be allowed to fall in any significant way. The analysis argues that when you look at what our leaders do, not what they say, the solvency of the big four banks has become the #1 national priority. And suddenly, when you look through this lens, a whole bunch of government policies that seem to make absolutely no sense start to make perfect sense. They aren't separate, illogical decisions. They're all just different tools being used to achieve that one single goal: keep house prices propped up.
So from this perspective, why have record immigration during a massive housing shortage? The argument goes that it's to create a constant floor under housing demand. A migrant isn't being imported as a new neighbor, but as a financial unit designed to feed the mortgage engine and make sure the bank's collateral, which is everyone's homes, retains its value.
You can even see this framework play out in the political debates about solutions. You have Labor's Housing Australia Future Fund, a speculative investment fund, which is framed as realistic and responsible. And then you have the Greens' proposal for direct government investment, which gets dismissed as absolute pixie dust. See the pattern? Market-based ideas that don't rock the boat are pragmatic. Direct action is seen as reckless. So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Let's bring it all together and get right to the core conclusion of this entire analysis.
The ultimate conclusion from the source material is this. Australia does not have a housing policy designed to house people. What we have is a bank solvency policy, where pretty much every major decision is reverse engineered from that one primary need, keeping the banks afloat.
And what this creates is the ultimate moral hazard. The banks get to keep the billions in profits when things are good, but the minute a crash threatens, all the pain and all the risk gets socialized. It's paid for by us in the form of crippling rental stress, overcrowding, and a falling quality of life. These are the social bailouts we're paying for every single day.
And so the source material leaves us with this final, very provocative question. If this analysis is right, and our entire society is being re-engineered just to protect the balance sheets of a few banks, how much more of our future are we really willing to sacrifice just to keep them dry?